I had this old man telling me about this story of a cryptid. He called them tree people and described them as long, lanky humanoids made of roots and moss and other foliage as secret and sweet and acrid-smelling sappy substance. He said they climb into things through their mouths and puppet them and consume their souls. And they only possess things to feed on other things. He swears that him and his buddy went out hunting one summer when he was like 19, and they saw this deer chewing just above the grass, not actually eating anything, just chewing on air, and that the eye that they could see was looking directly at them and they're blind a little ways off. The eye was unnatural for a deer, mostly white with a ring of very pale blue and a large pupil. The other hunter was freaked out a little and wanted to leave, so they packed up, but when they exited the blind, the deer was closer, just chewing and staring. He said the other hunter couldn't stop staring at the thing, and it wasn't running, so he approached it. When the hunter got close enough to touch it, a long, sticky black arm slowly stretched out of the deer's mouth and started caressing the guy's face. The dude who told me the story said the other hunter hit the ground after being touched and started convulsing while the thing kept climbing out of the deer's mouth and touching the dude. He said it shot at the deer like 2 or 3 times and it ran off. And he got his buddy to the hospital and he ended up not remembering anything. And the doctor said he has some sort of freak seizure. So honestly, what do you guys think? Weird old man telling porcupines? Or is it a cryptid? I originally posted this in the cryptozoology Reddit page, but apparently it's paranormal. So sometime last year, I worked as a janitor at an elementary school, and I only worked there for a few months, but I'd never forget the time I worked there. I worked the night shift, and I was the only person in the school at night. I went in at 3 p.m. and got off at 11:30 p.m., and from 3 to 6, the teachers were still there, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. But when they left and I was alone, the whole school just took on a different atmosphere entirely, and I never truly felt alone, and at times throughout the night, I felt like someone was watching me. I mostly ignored it and tried to keep my mind occupied listening to music and whatnot. One night, I was on break in the teacher's lounge, and when all of a sudden I could hear faint music playing somewhere. The break room was next to the parking lot, so I thought it could have been coming from a car outside. But there was no cars in the parking lot. The walls were brick, so surely it wouldn't be able to hear noises from outside through the brick wall, right? It went away later that night, but it still freaked me out a little. I've experienced disembodied singing and music playing before in my life, and the feeling had me similarly on edge. Another night, I was heading outside to another building of the school and where the playground was at, and I clearly saw one of the swings of the swing set violently swinging back and forth. I mean, this thing was moving with force behind it, and I know it wasn't windy that night, so I have no idea what else could have caused this, as there was no one else around. Again, another night, I was going to another side of the building outside, and I see this pitch black dog that was darker than night. Thinking it was just a dog, I called to it, but it just walked off under some lights. It stopped and just stared at me for a few seconds and just walked away. What was weird, even under the light, I could see no features of the dog, just a pitch black shadow, no eye glow, nothing. I have no idea if this encounter was paranormal per se, or just some dog, but it didn't feel right, and it freaked me out enough that I took it as some sort of omen. So I should mention that the school was divided into 3 separate buildings and some trailers outside that were used as classrooms. I absolutely hated going into the center building because that's where I felt the most uneasy. So I'm in the building working my way down the hall, and I get to the kindergarten and preschool section. Now this was around 7 p.m. and there was still a teacher there finishing up, and I go to break at this time. And as I come back after break, she had left. But what's weird is I start to hear this noise coming from down the hall from what sounds like another classroom. Anyway, I ignore it for now, but I keep hearing it. And as I'm getting closer to the room, it's becoming more and more noticeable. It sounds like what I can only describe as knocking. It just keeps going, and it's in random patterns. And as soon as I enter the room, it's another feeling of anxiety and unease and fear that come over me as the knocking continues. My whole body just freezes in place, like I can't move at all. But I manage to pull my phone and try to actually record it. But as soon as I'm starting to record, it stops for about 10 seconds, and then it knocks again. But this time, there's 3 big knocks. At this point, I feel physically sick to my stomach and manage to leave the room. I'm so terrified of what I just heard that I'm almost sprinting to leave the school and go home. But as I'm leaving, I feel as whatever it was right on top of me. And I mean, it's heavy feeling on my back. And I swear, I feel like something touches the back of my neck. I'll add that the knocks were very loud, as I can hear them from across the hall outside of the room, and also that the walls were solid brick. So whatever it was had to knock with power and force to make that much noise. So I go back home and tell my sister, who is very sensitive to this sort of thing. So she makes me a protection jar to wear while I'm at work. And I never encountered anything like that after that night. I still felt like whatever was there was still constantly watching me at all times. Anyway, I quit my job soon after, but I still would never forget the experience I had there. I don't know for sure if it was paranormal, but I believe that there was definitely something there that didn't want me there, as that school was so weird in general. The whole place, the kids, the teachers, it all just felt off. I've been thinking about this encounter for over 20 years now, and I can't make sense of it, so I figured I would share. Approximate date and location: 1997, 1998, in the Appalachian region of the Carolinas in the southeast United States. I was a kid, probably first grade, maybe second. I was sitting on a couch in our old trailer with my backpack on. It was a double wide, so I can look across through the wall opening to the dining room from the couch in the living room very easily. It was a small space, so this wasn't far away at all. As I'm sitting there waiting for my mom to finish drying her hair, I look up, and directly in front of me, standing or floating behind the dining room table, is this solid black man. I look at him, and he turns to look at me. We make eye contact, if I can call it that, because his eyes are just 2 burning red holes. When he makes eye contact with me, it feels like time just stops, and I feel the most complete terror I have ever felt in my life. Even to this day, and frankly, I've been through a statistically improbable number of really terrifying things. Nothing compares to that feeling, at all. I was completely frozen, absolutely terrified. And after what feels like an eternity without a moment, he just turns and kind of floats out of the end of the trailer. As soon as it ends, he's gone. I immediately jump up and ran screaming to my mother. I tell her what just happened, and she tells me that it's okay, that it's just my grandpa. And I insist to her that he is absolutely not my grandfather. We're from Appalachia, so ghosts and things like that were well accepted as real, although it is definitely also understood that sometimes people make shit up for the sake of tall tale. So yes, ghosts are real, but you have to look at them with an attitude of discernment. Anyway, I still can't make sense of it all. About a decade ago, in my early 20s, I found a story online about shadow men, even shadow men with hats. And that really shook me up because it was my first time that I had encountered someone talking about anything similar to what I've experienced. But I haven't seen any accounts of this specific person. The sheer terror I felt, completely consumed by fear, gives me an indication that whatever this thing was, it was not kind or good. Did anyone have any similar experiences? It occurs to me that it might be relevant to include that a lot of really messed up abusive violence stuff happened in that house and on that land, and that I was raised experiencing things that no child should ever experience. I'll leave it at that. Anyway, a lot of darkness and straight up evil was in that environment. It was December 24th, 1987. My family went to visit my great aunt in Wilmington, Delaware, as we often did for Christmas. Her husband, which is my grandfather, died in the house some 20 years earlier. After dinner, my brother and I went to sleep in one of the bedrooms upstairs. I went to sleep on the left side of the bed, which was closest to the door. My great aunt had this thing where she hated doors to be shut and absolutely not to be locked, so it was wide open as we drifted off. I woke up in the middle of the night, sounds of something on the roof. I was 7 at the time, and I'd just about given up my belief in Santa. It really sounded like footsteps. Could it be him? I tried to wake up my brother, but to no avail. Shortly thereof, I turned to my left to see a figure just outside of the doorway. It was human-shaped with his arms stretched towards the frame. It was completely black. I know someone was there because it was darker than the surrounding shadows cast in the hallway. The only person in the house that was that large was my father. Supposing it was him, I said, "Dad?" But there was no response. At this point, I was starting to get scared and focused on his head to see his face. The only two features I could make out were 2 red points of light where the eyes should have been. It was then that I realized that I had messed up because I was speaking out loud, letting it know that I was awake. I have rarely before or since felt such dread. I reached to my right and tried to wake up my older brother. Again, no dice. I was alone with this thing 3 feet away from me. The only thing I could think of was to just pull a blanket over my head and pretend I was sleeping and hope to God that it hadn't heard me. Several minutes later, I peered from under the blankets and it was gone. About 5 years later, I was riding to school with my brother and my mom, and I worked up enough nerve to tell them about it. I knew it could have been my imagination, so I told them with an air of levity. When I was done telling them about the situation, they were silent for about 2 minutes. When I asked my mom what was wrong, she turned towards me in the back seat and said, "We've seen him too." Good evening, everyone. This is Yuri K, and this is the end of the video. Please leave a comment and let us know your opinions on the matter. If you happen to like this content, please check out our other videos. Make sure you like and share amongst your friends and family to help our community grow. You happen to be new to this channel? Please make sure you subscribe. It's free, and you can always change it in the future. You have some terrifying story suggestions? If so, make sure that you send it to my email, fearofthedarkstories@gmail.com, and I'll feature it in a future segment. But you guys stay safe out there, and remember to always be afraid of the dark.